Hi again then guys, and welcome to another circuit tune, of course, for Gran Turismo Sport's new 5 vehicles in the 1.34 patch, this time the McLaren F1 GTR. Now we're going to put this out on Dragon Trail, as we always do. Some people ask why I keep using that track. It's pretty simple, the reason why I do. It's the same reason why Top Gear uses their track, to test every car. It's a point of reference. It's a track where you can see how cars compare, and the lap doesn't take too long to test and retest. So it just works, basically. It's my form of the Top Gear test track. Now, as far as upgrades go, I wanted to be able to give you a good idea of how this car would perform even with balance of performance applied when you cannot necessarily increase the power or drop the weight. So basically without any kind of advantage in terms of upgrades. So that's exactly what we did. Stock weight and stock power. Now of course you could still use this with more power, but as I said, that's down to you. Now traction control I've got turned off. Chances are, if you're driving something like this, you probably don't use traction control anyway, because it's not as much of a beginner's car, but if you do decide to, then of course, that's absolutely fine. Most race cars these days use traction control anyway, so there is nothing wrong with that, and anyone who says otherwise is uninformed. Now, as far as the tyres go, as I've said a number of times, I do not use the best tyres you can get, because it makes it too easy, and then if you're forced to use worse ones, you might just lose control because you don't know how to use it. Whereas if you work from racing hards, then of course mediums and softs can be even better. So by all means change up if you want to, but this is just to show you what it can do even on hard tyres. Now brake balance I haven't adjusted. For the suspension I would recommend dropping the ride height as far as it can go. To some degree that depends on the track. If it's overly bumpy, for instance, say the Nordschleife, you might want to increase it to maybe 5mm higher. For the frequency we've got that on 3, anti-roll on 6, for the compression on the dampers 56, and then 85 for the rebound. We've got quite a high camber angle on this one, but it is lower than stock. You start off with like 3 degrees, I think it is, on the back at least, if not the front as well. So we've dropped that to 2 degrees, which is still higher than I would typically have. As far as toe, that is neutral. For the downforce, I've set it as high as possible because this is predominantly a more technical circuit tune. It's not designed for Le Mans, for instance, or Route X, obviously. As far as the diff, I would recommend increasing the initial torque up to halfway instead of 10. Then I've left the acceleration and braking both on the default settings. Again, you could change those by all means if you want to, but I find it actually works pretty nicely on those settings. And finally, for the transmission, of course you will need to extend the gears if you give it more power, but as far as having 600 horsepower with full downforce, you want the fully customized transmission. I would recommend an auto setting, which is actually, I think, the default. It's already on 193 as soon as you fit that. Then for the individual gears, we've got 2.9, which is shortened to improve the acceleration off the line. 22.25 for second, then 17.50, 14.50, 12.15 and 10.25 with that final drive of 3. So that's it for the setup. Of course, as always, there is tons of room for your personal twist. You could make a hybrid between your tune and mine. You could test it, try out other things, and if it doesn't work, just come back and fit this one again. But of course, what you want to see is what can it do. Now, as far as the lap times that this car can give you, it's very good. It's not going to beat everything, but it is very good, especially for its age. This car is, what, 20 years old? In fact, more than that now. So for a car that is that old to even still be able to compete is impressive. In terms of lap time here at Dragon Trail, it's around the same kind of lap that something like, for instance, my Porsche GT3 RSR race car can do, except that one was tuned to like 730 horsepower. This has 600, so a huge difference. And just as a point of reference as well, if you compare this, for instance, to the McLaren P1 GTR, which has, of course, well over 900 horsepower to this car's 600, a massive difference, that is only 2 seconds quicker than this. And that is basically a race car itself anyway, in terms of its ability. So again, for such an old school car, comparatively speaking at least, to still be this good, it's very impressive. Now, in terms of how beginner friendly it is, how you should use the car, You don't really need me to tell you that much. It's the kind of car that you can get a feel for after only a couple of corners. It's one of the best all-round current Group 3 cars I would say that we have. So if you decide to use this tune, I hope of course you have a ton of fun with it. And that's it for this build, so click here on screen to see all of my others, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.